Okay, so thank you for joining me. Today is Sunday, March the 10th, and we just came out of heavy windstorms again, and snow and ice and everything overnight. Temperatures rose, and we're now in the mid 40s, so at least the snow is melting off, but it is still raining outside. And this is a video that I've wanted to make for a while because it deals with the Flow-Hive. So if you're one of the people that's not interested in Flow-Hives, there may still be some information here that's helpful to you. This whole series is designed for beginning beekeepers. And today I'll be talking about 3 different Flow-Hive designs and that are marketed from the most basic to the most elaborate and of course the most expensive. I'll talk about things that I'm doing with the Flow-Hives to get you through winter, to get you through colder climate survival with your bees, and how to progress from the landing board and the bottom board right through the brood box, how to feed them. And some of the Flow-Hives are not really designed to get your bees through cold weather, so you have to add things to improve your bees' chances. The cool thing is too, this is the 4th year with the Flow-Hive, and I wanted to thank the Cedar and Stuart Anderson, the whole Anderson family, for coming up with the Flow-Hive design. Great innovation, and of course the boxes are compatible with other boxes. So for example, there's 8 and 10 frame Langstroth boxes. Your Flow-Hives are also compatible. There's a 6 frame Flow-Hive which matches the 8 frame Langstroth, and then there's a 7 frame Flow-Hive which matches the 10 frame Langstroth box. So I've done some mods and made my own feeding supers and things like that. And that's what we're going to cover in this video, starting right off with the most basic, which is a Flow Super. And then the next one will be the full-size Flow-Hive. And then the last part of this video will be the Flow-Hive 2 6-frame version, which is the 8-frame size. And I'll talk about the things that will get you through winter. Also some integrated pest management aspects to it. And at the very end, there will be a link to all of our frequently asked questions videos. And also there will be a link to all of my Flow-Hive experience videos. So if you want to see these things functioning and how the bees actually use them, we are not able to go outside and do that right now. Although I can say, even though the weather's been terrible, our bees are making it. They were flying yesterday, even though it was raining and again, and it was windy. And they're alive. So even tiny bee clusters that nobody thought would make it through because it was a late season swarm into September, those are alive and flying as of yesterday. So the chances are good, and we're going to cover in this video how to overcome some of those cold weather challenges that happen here. I should describe where I'm located. I'm in the United States along the Great Lakes region, northeast. It's an area that we call the Snow Belt, and that's because last year, for example, right where I live, we're 1,300 feet above sea level. We're considered an agricultural zone 4, so it's pretty challenging for growing seasons. And we get record snowfall up here, many feet of snow. Last year, I think we got about 100 inches of snow where I live, and was no better this year, other than we didn't have the snowfall. We had terrific cold weather and high wind events. In fact, the stainless steel capper blew off of my chimney, and I still haven't found that, so I had to buy another one. So let's get into it. Let's talk about the Flow-Hive. Okay, so we're going to start right off with the most basic Flow-Hive you can get, and that is by purchasing just this Flow Super. This happens to be a 7-frame Flow Super, which matches the 10-frame Langstroth boxes. And you can buy it, it comes just the way it's shown here. You get that side panel access, so you can look into the frames on the side. You get all the Flow frames, and you get one box, and you get a hat, and you get the key that activates everything, and you get a hive tool. And that's it. This is the most basic, and you can begin with this. So we're beginning our discussion today with just a Flow Super, and I'm going to show you how to put this together as if you just got your bees, and you're going to progress from there. So let's set this thing up for cold weather. So a lot of people, when they get this new and they want to put it all together, they just want to put all the components together and get it out in the bee yard and stack all the boxes at once and then put their bees in. That's a bad beginning, and I'm going to explain why that is. We want to start the bees slow, and remember, the bees come first in everything we do. So the first thing you're going to have is a landing board. Now this is a landing board that I built myself. Look how heavy the stock is. This is about 1.5 inches thick stock. This is heavy pine. These are pine slats. All the joints are sealed. They're sealed along the edges because we don't want to leave any space for mites and parasites to hide. The underside has a standoff so that it's up off the bottom. The other thing I want you to notice is the way I make it, the sides extend out farther than the landing board needs to be. And that's because at some point you're going to be tilting this backwards to 2 degrees so that your flow hive can be extracted. So I extend the side rails out a little farther. Now does that mean you have to make your own? You don't. I have this is a standard, my old crappy Langstroth 10 frame. They match up, and this kind of shows you the comparison of the stock, for example. When you build things yourself, you can make it as robust as you want to be, but compare mine to what the standard boxes that you might buy. You can get these anywhere. Better Bee, Dedant, Man Lake, they're all compatible with the Flow Hive. So you have to start with a bottom board, and let's go from there. So now we're going to start with what's called a deep brood box. You have choices. You have a deep, a medium, and a shallow. But we always start our bee boxes with 1 deep at least. And because we're in the northern climates, this is a 10 frame. If you do not have already drawn out comb, which most people won't when they start out, you might want to consider a heavy waxed 1-piece plastic foundation that is food grade. And this particular one is made by Acorn Bee Company. And they're heavy wax, and it's been my experience that when you're starting out with a frame of bees and you're starting out with a box of bees, that they will draw out the heavy wax plastic comb first. You also have an option of using wooden frames, which also come with your flow hive. And they have a little wooden spline here at the top, and that's where you would prime it with wax. I've never had to prime these with wax. I put them between plastic frames, and the bees draw them out on their own. So just for the brood box, you can use plastic frames. You can also insert foundation into the wooden frames, which I personally don't do. But we want to get the bees started in here, so you might be inserting a package of bees, 3-pound package with a queen. You might put in nucleus bees. So if you have a nuke, that's your fastest buildup. And the other thing, of course, is you could catch a swarm, which is going to be your slowest and least predictable buildup of bees. So once they're in there, we have to cover this box and we have to feed the bees to make sure they get off to a good start. And remember, don't just throw your Flow Super on already, because these bees have to fill the box. We don't want them to have so much area that they can't control or protect it, and they're really not strong enough as a colony. So you can also just take a regular cover. This one has a bunch of burr comb all over it still. But you could put a regular cover on this, and then just put a telescoping top on it. And I recommend, since we're starting them off, a polystyrene cover top. And that's the whole hive ready to go. But guess what they have inside? No resources, nothing to grow on. So then you'd be counting on them to fly out and bring in all of the resources on their own. But let's give them a head start. One thing that you could put on here to start them off right would be a hive top feeder, like this Ceracell feeder. This comes with its own wooden shim, which matches the 10 frame box. It would go run on just like this. And then the bees don't come up into the top here, so we don't need another cover. They're held into the sugar syrup area. I'm assuming that since you're starting with your bees, winter has passed and all the threat of freezing has passed, so now you can put them in a sugar syrup situation. So you're going to pour 1-to-1 sugar syrup in here, and that will give these bees down below plenty of resources to start drawing out the comb. And they can do their foraging for their pollen on their own. But if it starts raining and you get some bad weather after you've put them in there, they won't starve out, and they'll have the energy that they need right here from this feeder. But the other thing is, I made my own version of a feeder box, and I'll show you that. Okay, so I made this one myself. It is ridiculously thick. The outsides are made out of maple. These bottom panels are made out of 1.25 inch pine. So this is a heavy duty box. You don't have to put the cover on. You can put this right on the top here. And this becomes what's called a feeder shim. So this is just the woodenware. So we still have to put something inside of here so that we can feed the bees. And what I like to use right now for this box is the Rapid Round. This fits an 8 frame or a 10 frame, and you can feed sugar, you can feed syrup, dry or wet liquids, and you put it in the box inside here, and that's the resource for your bees. So this is going to be a multi-purpose cover. We can use this as the feeder with this insert, which of course blocks their entry into this larger space. And instead they'll be confined just through this cup to get to the feed and then back down inside the hive. Plus they're completely protected from robbing from above. There's no upper entrance right now. And this is a great way to start them out. No matter what the weather does, they're going to have food and resources inside the hive, even though they're brand new. Now with the rapid round feeder in place, you really don't need a inner cover up here because the bees can't access this area. They can only get inside that rapid round feeder. So you can just put your cover right on the top there. It's insulated, they're covered and shielded, and then we can just monitor their progress down here in the brood box and see how things go. Now let's say the bees have been fed, they made great progress and they filled all of this. You've got brood in here, you've got pollen, they've been filling out the outsides, they've drawn the wax, and you have honey and everything is good to go, and the population has built up. This is where, if you lived in a warm climate, you would be adding the Flow Super right now. But remember, the premise of this video is to show you how to get them through winters in the northeastern United States or some other really cold region. So your next box is either going to be a medium super or a deep super. And in this case, we're putting on a medium super. And again, remember, this is a brand new hive, so we want them to draw out the comb. So again, we have medium frames, 1-piece plastic. In this case, they're by Acorn, heavy dipped with wax, and it's my experience that they'll draw these out the fastest. So that's when, now we're still in the process of building your bee population, letting them establish their resources here, and you can still take that feeder and put it right on top of this. And we still have the rapid round up inside, so there's still no need for an inner cover, and we can just have the standard polystyrene cover or Bee Smart design cover, whatever you want to do. So this is still a building process and the colony is still strengthening. So they would have filled this box and now they're starting to work on this box. Once this fills completely with honey and resources, that's when we're going to put on our FlowHive Flow Super. Okay, so this is pretty important. How did we get to this point? Remember, we had the brood in this box. We waited for them to fill these frames with honey. And what that does is creates a honey bridge between this and now your Flow Super. This is the Flow Super that's full of all the flow frames. They're in here, they're ready to be filled by the bees. This is something that actually in your first year of beekeeping in the northern climates of the United States, they may never get this far in your first year, and don't feel bad about that. Because what you're really doing is you're culturing the bees. And you don't need a queen excluder here. If you look in Australia where the people are putting these together, they're going to use this box, they're going to put a queen excluder in, and then they're going to have the Flow Super right on top of that. But remember, we're trying to get our bees through northern winters. So we needed this extra box of, this is about 45 pounds of honey. We need this to get them through winter time. So we want that resource first, then we want them to come up here and work these flow hives. Now they will work flow frames in my area, and my bees have done that in the first year, but usually they didn't fill them all the way up until September came along. So let's turn this thing around and look at it from behind. Okay, so this is the back of the hive. And now we can see this is where you later will be extracting the honey, but it's also where you're going to observe the bees' progress working on this here. Now what if we want to give feed to the bees that are here in this stage? When you're actually getting honey and you're trying to develop honey that you're going to extract, you really do not want to be adding sugar syrup. It's the worst time to do that. We want all of these great honey frames to be filled by natural sources of flowers out in the environment where you live. We don't want to be feeding them sugar syrup now to have that just end up metabolized and then put in these cells. So you're no longer feeding once you get to this point. Plus, if you're treating your bees, if you're doing oxalic vaporization or something like that, you also stopped treating at this level, because this honey, remember, was not for your consumption. This is for the bees. So when you're putting on any kind of supers where you're going to draw the honey, we want to make sure that this is not tainted with any kind of treatments, even oxalic vaporization. So now what do you put on top of this? Can you just put, you can put an inner cover on there, but that's been a problem because this thickness, the Flow-Hive covers, the inner covers for the Flow-Hives have a huge, broad rim on them that keeps the bees out of this area of your flow frames. So that feeder super that I designed and built is of such thick material that it will cover the top here. So it's a combination feeding super, and it also is thick enough through here that it blocks access down into this area where you don't want the bees. The bees can't come through here, they can't access any of these joints here, and this heavy feeder box on top now acts just as a vent instead of a source for putting feed in, because remember, we don't want to give them sugar syrup anymore. And now this is what it's going to look like from the front. Brood, super full of honey. They're working on the flow frames. Now I put my top feeder on, even though there's no feed in it right now. So what's the purpose of that? Well, we have to get it high enough so that we can put a cover on it. But look, it also allows me to rotate this to a venting position. We can have a queen excluder position here, or we can open it up, and now we have a top entrance for the bees. And I've had really good luck with these top entrances, because now the foraging bees that are coming in with nectar are going to go straight to the flow frames and not come in through the landing board and have to migrate up through all of this to get to those flow frames. So now we can feed, but if things get out of hand up here, if maybe there's some risk of robbing or something like that, we can close it off completely, go to venting, because remember, they're going to be dehydrating and condensing that honey. And then on top of this, because now this space is fully accessed by the bees, so we actually need to now put an inner cover on it. And again, polystyrene or some other cover on top of it like this. And now you've got your complete hive. And there's no reason to expand bigger than this. So if you do get lucky enough and they cap off all the honey, now you can draw off your flow frames. This stays here. And for those of you who like to get cut comb, chunk honey, and things like that, once they fill your flow frames, they're actually going to go up into this space, into this box, and they're going to start running heavy comb through there, and they're also going to fill it with honey that later you can scrape off, put it in jars, and drain out your honey off of the back right into the flow frame, right from the flow frame, right into the jar, and have chunk honey that you scraped out of here. So this takes some routine maintenance. Your inner cover prevents them from gluing down this with propolis. And they will, of course, seal all of these joints with propolis on their own. And then down here for entrance reducers, I should have covered that because we're trying to protect them. They're new. What I do is I take aluminum screen and I roll this up and I just tuck it in here. And I create a ventilated landing board restrictor, which is an entrance reducer, and then the bees will come and go through the middle. So I'll put a screen on either side that lets them be ventilated, but it also gives them a narrow area that they can successfully defend against stronger colonies that may try to rob them out. So that's it for the first and most basic flow hive that will match your 10-frame Langstroth boxes and any custom gear you want to add. Now the season's over. It's wintertime now. Let's say they didn't even fill all these frames, but you have to get these guys through winter, and you don't want to leave them having access to the flow frames as we go into winter, so you're going to have to take this box off. Once you do that, remember we're down to the brood box and the honey super, which is full. And what goes on here now? You have to be ready for winter, so you have two choices. The Curacao box here, but if you do that, you have to put a inner cover between this and the bottom, so we've created two joints when we do that. So I prefer, and why I was out in the shop recently building, I prefer to use my new multi-purpose top. And remember, there's bee space in here. I left a gap so they have lots of room to move around here. This goes right on top. Now I have a box for feeding dry. And again, we just put the rapid round in there, or you can put protein patties, you can put anything you want in this box. This is what it looks like on the inside. We have the full 2-inch hole going right down into the bees. All the edges are sealed. We have the option, of course, still here to allow them access through the hole or just vent, or in the dead of winter, seal it off completely. And then you can put your rapid round feeder back in there as we did before. And if you have that in place, remember, if the rapid round feeder is in here, we don't need an inner cover, and we can go straight to the insulated cover. Now you're buttoned up at the end of the year to go through winter. And if you need to feed them or add anything when you open this up, because that rapid round sits right over that hole, there's no risk of chilling your bees when you open this up. And remember, there's a bottom board inside of here that is 1.25 inches thick. So they're well protected and insulated from the outside air, and we created an airspace. Then we have that polystyrene cover, so they're also protected from condensation dripping in on them. So it's a great setup. So now you're into winter, and hopefully now they're going to make it. Okay, so the next FlowHive system we're going to talk about is their 7-frame FlowHive, and this has the compatibility with a 10-frame Langstroth boxes. So this is the FlowHive bottom board here. It has stainless steel screen or something that's non-corrosive, maybe aluminum. But it also has integrated pest management with this board. It allows you to control ventilation. You can pull it out. It's in an open space now. We can slide it up one more and close it off completely. Notice that their bottom board has a built-in shim that tilts it back. And we also have this little dam on the front that the bees have to climb over. My bees are Varroa resistant hygienic bees. So when they are grooming off Varroa, for example, they fall down onto this screen and go through it and onto the bottom board, and that helps them better control Varroa. I don't really have a big problem with small hive beetles, but I suppose it would also be helpful with them. So this is the beginning. You want to make sure when you're putting your bee boxes somewhere, again, because I'm in a cold climate, I want to face their landing boards to the south, because in the wintertime that's going to get the most heat. I also want to make sure that this is completely level, and I also want to make it about 15 or 16 inches off the ground, and that's so that skunks and other predators aren't trying to get into the hive and bother my bees. So again, this will come with 2 deeps, and the second one, of course, is the FlowHive. They also have a queen excluder, and I'm going to talk about why I do or don't use that. And I'm going to show my method, which is how I've eventually come up with the idea of not using queen excluders. So this is your first box, your brood box, and I think this material is hoop pine, and the last one we're going to show will be cedar. Now I'm going to assume that you don't already have frames. So when you buy this in, it comes with a complete kit. It comes with everything that the Flow Super comes with, all the frames, everything you need, hive tool, and so on. But this one has the inner cover, it has the bottom board, and it has wooden frames that are empty. So there again, if you want to speed it up, if you're putting your package bees in here or your nukes, and those are the only 2 that I really recommend you start out with. I wouldn't recommend you start with a swarm. But I mean, if you spend all this money for a FlowHive, I'm just going to take the leap and guess that you can probably afford to buy in bees that are of a variety that you want. I personally use the Bee Weaver line of bees out of Texas because they are survivor line bees that have gone without treatment for many, many years. But these heavy wax acorn frames are what have been the fastest source frames for my bees to build up in the past, so that's what I'm using here. And of course there are 10 of them. And then what are you going to put on top of this? Remember, I don't want you to put all your boxes together. Some people get the whole system, put the whole system together, put it in their garden, and then they just let the bees do their thing. What we really want to do is contain the bees in the brood box until they fill the space, build out their resources in here, and use that space. Plus, it's small enough that they can completely defend it. That's really important if you don't want your new bees to be robbed out, and if you don't want them to have problems with pests like the small hive beetle that some people are having problems with, or if you want them to be able to control varroa and groom each other and police their area, keep them in this box until they've built up enough. Now, this is just a development box, so remember, we're not going to harvest any honey out of here. So this is a time when you can feed. So we're going to go right back to a hive top feeder. And again, remember, this is the one that I've built myself because I'm going to be experimenting with this year, and I know it's going to do fantastic because, you know, I designed it. So the other options, there are lots of different hive top feeders. If you're going to use, remember, the Carousel feeder, it won't go on top of that feeder, it goes by itself. So let's pull this off. It's another option. Now this, of course, does not come with your FlowHive, but if you want these bees to build up fast and you don't want to be one of those people that just set up your beehive and then the wind and the rain and the weather went bad, and what happens is the bees will be building up their honey resources down here, and then when the weather turns bad, they just consume it again. So you end up with bees unable to draw out the comb they need and unable to expand the way they really need to. You can also pull this feeder out and just use this as a feeder shim. So if you want to put other types of feeders in here, you could do that too if you just had a shim. So this is a great way to go. And again, when you put this on here, if you have those plastic covers over it that keep the bees from coming up, because again, you're starting in warm weather, you can give them syrup 1-to-1 by weight. And you do have to drill these holes yourself so the bees can come up through the center. They also come up through the corners there, and they will have resources the whole time. So, and then of course you're just going to put your FlowHive cover, because you get a FlowHive lid with this. But now there's something good about that FlowHive lid that I'm going to show you. Okay, so we've got our package bees or our nucleus of bees in here. I don't use nuke boxes. I go straight into an 8 or 10 frame box, and that's what I do also with the Flow-Hives. So once this is in here and they're established, now we're going to put in the inner cover. This is the FlowHive, flow.com inner cover. They're a little thicker than most. They're pretty well made, and it has that nice hole, perfectly designed for that rapid round feeder. This goes right on top, and now we have these air gaps here, which the bees are going to seal up, and that's the purpose of the inner cover, so that you can still pull it off. Then we're going to put this FlowHive cover on top. Now, what have I done? It really doesn't matter if you put that on front ways or back ways, because it's going to cover the whole thing here. I think this is backwards because this is where we would have access. But what I did was I left the cover open. So I did not do the other side here, just so we could show how the feeder goes into it. The good news is the 7 frame FlowHive, which is a 10 frame Langstroth box, is big enough to accommodate one of these feeders. And notice that it sits flush right there. This prevents the bees from accessing this whole space up in here. And you can pull the lid off and have access to the feeder without exposing the bees to foul weather. And you can just put dry or liquid feed in here on the top, take care of it. I recommend that you have multiples of these. I do. And that's so that when I come out to this hive to take care of it, I have a nice clean one ready to go. I pull the dirty one off, new one's in place, they're being fed, and how much time were they exposed to the weather? Microseconds. Then I'll take this inside and we'll wash everything out. We'll get rid of that sugar syrup, and we'll make sure it's fresh and that the bees are getting the best resources they can get. Now, the good news is, of course, as I mentioned, that this cover is wide enough and big enough to accommodate that. So now we can feed these bees and build this up. What's the next thing that should go on there? Based on our other discussion, should we go right into the Flow Super right away once the numbers build up there? No, we shouldn't, because remember, we're doing this for northern climates. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to put another super on there. Now this is up to you. This is compatible with standard Langstroth boxes. So we can put a medium super on it if you want to do that. Or you can put a full double nuke on there, a double brood box. So, but generally where I live, you can put this medium super on here. And again, we're going to do the same thing we did with the first demonstration. We want them to fill this with honey resources and cap that off that they're going to use to get themselves through winter. So it's only after they've done that that we're going to put the Flow Super on here. Now you can buy supers from FlowHive that match this bottom box. You can use a double deep as a second super. That's going to be about 75 pounds of honey when that's full. And then we're going to go to the Flow Super. So let's do that. Now this setup is really ambitious because what we did was we have a 10 frame deep. Now for our honey super, we have another 10 frame deep. And this one we have, of course, wooden frames in. Again, if you have frames that are already drawn out, you're going to be way ahead. The acorn plastic, double, triple dipped waxed frames will be drawn out the fastest. But there again, who's this honey for? This is for the bees. This is not for you. So don't be sealing their honey off of the second box. Remember, the whole purpose of this demonstration is to get our bees through winter. So what are we going to put up here? We're going to put another feeder box on. Nice, thick and heavy. And there again, now we have the opportunity. We're going to put our feeder in this, which is going to prevent them from roaming around inside the space, which also means we don't need a hive inner cover on that. But you can do it just so you don't lose your stuff. So put the FlowHive inner cover on there, and of course we put the FlowHive lid on it. So this is an ambitious setup. You are really counting on your bees to fill all of this up, but we can still feed, because remember, you're not going to be consuming this honey yourselves. You're going to be just allowing the bees to build up their resources. So you can still treat with oxalic vapor, you can still take care of the bees, you can still do pest management, because none of the honey that's on here is for human consumption, it's all for the bees. So then, once they filled both of these, and remember, this is also how I avoid using queen excluders. If we have a bunch of honey in here and the brood is down here, the queen's not going to cross the honey and go up into my Flow Super and lay eggs in it, because I've done this testing several years, and 2 out of 3, even with just one super, only use the flow frames for brood. So you're pretty safe once you establish that layer of honey. Plus, this honey is going to get your bees through winter. So now your FlowHive is on there. These are the flow frames. These are for you. So we have a strong brood, strong honey resource. Now we opened it up to allow them to fill this up. And that's when you're also going to put on your cover, because do we want to feed these to keep them going? Not anymore. That's because once you have honey on, once you have these frames on, and this honey is going to be for human consumption, we're not going to put any more feeders on. No more liquid syrup, no more food for the bees. They're going to get it all from the wild, and that's what's going to fill your flow frames up. And that is the full-size 7-frame FlowHive ready to go. So if this all happens in the first year, count your lucky stars, and then you get them through winter, that's awesome. Then the second year is probably when you're going to get them up here into this Flow Super, and they're going to start building up. And you can also vent the top. You can also put another feeder on top in the wintertime like this, because now what happens? Summer's over. Whether they finish filling these or not, we're going into winter, they have to come off. So we're going to remove the cover. Inner cover's gone. We have to condense it down. So if you have float frames in here and the bees did not fill them up, You're going to have to clean them up yourself and let the bees clean them up. And then now you're going to come down to this box for winter. Winter honey, brood, and this is what's going to get them through. So now what goes on here? We want to get them through winter, so we have to be able to feed them. So we're going to put the standard inner cover on here. And we're going to put the flow cover on. And then what goes inside here? Another rapid round feeder, which is going to allow you to care for these bees through the winter. And you're going to be able to put food on and stuff dry. Remember, as we go into winter time, there's no more liquid syrup. Once it's cold enough and things start freezing, you can only put dry feed in here. Now there is an option too. You don't have to put that rapid round in there. You can just put patties in here as you get into spring. You can put fondant up in here, and this is a double protection, and it's somewhat ventilated. Okay, so I mean, I prefer to put a rapid round up in here, but you have a space now. But once the bees have access up in here on these really warm days, and if they're really productive, they may start to put burr comb and wax all over up in here, and that's going to be difficult to clean out. So like I have that vented feeder box that I made, you could put something like that also on this for wintering. But the most convenient and the easiest for the bees is for you to put a rapid round in there, because remember, when you pull the lid off and you access that, you're not exposing them to cold. And you can also see if they're consuming the dry sugar and fondant or whatever you've decided to put in there. You can decide if they're keeping up. So that's it for the Flow-Hive 7 hoop pine version. The Flow 7 frame, 10 frame Langstroth, hoop pine, tilted bottom, integrated pest management, full-size cover that allows this, and you should be good to go and get that through winter now. Now before I finish up with this one, I do want to point out that you can, if you're living in an area that's not as severe as mine, and even some of my beehives have made it with just a medium super. So if you don't want your bees to fill a double deep, and you don't think they're going to get there, and let's be honest, a lot of bees just won't be strong enough to do that, you can put a medium super on. You can let them fill this, and then you can put your Flow Super Flow-Hive box with the flow frames in it on top of this. And this can still get your bees through winter time. You're going to know, as the years go by, what your bees need to get through. And then of course, with a feeding insert on the top, you will have the opportunity to take care of your bees and give them the feed that they need to survive through winter. But they are compatible. The reason that this one looks like it came from Man Lake. Right now, the Flow-Hive company doesn't even offer medium supers or shallow supers. So if you buy supers from honeyflow.com, you're going to be getting nothing but the deep boxes. So if you really think your bees just aren't going to manage that, or you don't need it because you're in an intermediate area that gets cold winters, but they're not severe, then you might be able to get away with just the medium box. So that's just food for thought. They just don't sell them at Flow-Hive, but they're compatible with the 10 frame standards. Now we have saved the most elaborate and the most advanced version of the Flow-Hive. This is the Flow-Hive 2. It's made out of cedar, and of course we're starting with this bottom board. And this thing has lots of unique aspects to it. First of all, it has adjustable legs so that this thing can be leveled. It has spirit levels built into the sides. Over here's one. Got one in the back. Where is that? Anyway, there's a level back there somewhere. And this thing has an aluminum insert, part of their pest management system. My hygienic bees are going to groom off little mites and stuff, and they're going to fall through this. And this is where we're going to have some fun this year. I want to show you this. Let's zoom in. Because what's going on here is they have a tray. And I always have high hopes. If I tell you, the bees are going to do something, I'm just speculating like everyone else. We don't know what the bees are going to do. But in the back, you have vent control, so you can flip this over. This is the closed vent setting right here. This is the open vent setting right here. But the cool part is what's in here. This is the tray, and I've done some fun stuff with this tray. Look what fits in here perfectly. These are Swiffer mop pieces. And these are the dusting Swiffers. I know a lot of people use the thin Swiffers that are for wiping your kitchen floor or whatever. But if you look at the fibers and stuff in this thing, plus look at, it's like they're designed just for this bottom tray. And they're flat enough that they don't stick up to where the bees can start to pull them through the aluminum cover. So this summer, what's going to be a lot of fun is, fun for me anyway, I'm going to be catching Varroa, and if there are small hive beetles that are running down in here, I'm going to be collecting them out of here and giving you some super close-up video of them. Look at these fibers. That is going to make them crazy. And then when these tops are full, you can just clip them off and there's plenty of layers underneath ready to go. So this to me is what's really going to make the mites and stuff that fall down in here crazy. Now of course you can pour, you know, cooking oil, or you can put some other oil in the bottom here that will just drown them and trap them, but now you've got a messy tray to clean up. So there's two things I'm going to be testing out with this year. One is these, and I may interchange them or push them to the sides and put sticky traps in here also. I'm using those mouse boards, which are only good when the weather's really warm anyway, but I'm going to put sticky mouse traps in here too and see what kind of stuff I get. So I'm going to be doing a lot of experimenting with this board this year. So it's just going to be fun. Now this is a 8 frame. So 8 frames, you know, a lot of people actually do use them in cold climates, but you're going to have to allow plenty of room for your bees to store resources, and the same thing is going to apply here. This, the whole deal has to get your bees through winter, and that's what we're going to show. So we have the bottom board. This is nice tight fit. It's aluminum. We have the back again, now going into winter. What are you going to do? When you're starting with your bees, of course, we'll just close this up for the beginning because let's face it, this is not airtight to begin with. So there is some airflow already. We're not that worried about it. And I'm also going to show you how to vent the top on this thing. So we have this. Now, you know, everything teeters on my table because this is a 100-year-old harvest table that was used by my wife's family. And it's just garbage. So, but look at that, because we have the adjustable legs, it's nice and stable. So we have this board, and we've already talked about where to put it. You're going to put it somewhere where it's sheltered from wind. We're going to put it off the ground to make sure predators can't get to it, and we're going to keep the ants down. And we want to make sure that this faces south so that when we get those nice southern sunny mornings, that it's going to shine on the landing board and it's going to warm up those bees and keep them happy. And the first box that's going to go on here is going to be a deep. So now we've put a deep box on here. And remember, this is a 6 frame Flow-Hive 2, which means it matches an 8 frame Langstroth box. And again, just as I said before, my quickest buildup is going to be with heavy waxed one-piece plastic frames. And though I've used Pierco, I've looked at the Man Lake versions. My personal preference is the Acorn Bee varieties. And they come in white, and they come in black. And if you see these green ones, that is for your drone comb, which people use as part of pest management. I just have it here for kicks. Now the cool thing is, on this box, this is the Flow-Hive 2, remember, so everything is fancy. You have windows on both sides. So, and this is just the brood box. So you have a window on this side, you have a window on this side, so you can look in on them without having to smoke your bees, without having to worry about harassing them, without pulling the cover. You can see what's going on down there and see if they're filling these frames. And remember, People often get excited and they want their neighbors to see their awesome box. So they put everything together and they put the top on it and give the bees all that space to manage. And remember, we're trying to get these bees through a northern climate winter. So what's the first thing we want to put on here? We just put bees in it. Remember, we want to use nukes or packaged bees because those will be the quickest buildup. So what's the next thing we want to put on? Just put on the lid and the inner cover? Nope. We want to put a feeder on it. So somewhere around here, I have a feeder. So to get our colony started off right, just as with the other one, I made another one of my heavy-duty shims slant feeders that are recessed to leave bee space, 2-inch hole in the bottom, maple outside box, and a pine bottom. The corners and edges are all sealed to prevent bug infestations. And then this can go right on top. Now it does have this little vent function, but we're going to keep that closed for now because remember, this is a brand new colony of bees that you want to put in here. And then we want to kick them off. So what are we going to do again? We're going to take a rapid round or some similar feeder and we're going to put it up there and we're going to plug that hole on top. Now remember, it's a screen bottom board here and they're not airtight and we can vent through the back of the bottom, so we don't worry so much about venting through the top right now. So you can have that feeder on. Now, does it matter if we're giving them sugar syrup right now, even though it's the beginning and they can fly out? If they need it, they'll use it. If they don't, they won't need it. They won't use it. But if you put your bees in here and you count on them just to forage and they bring in a bunch of nectar and they start raising their brood and then we get a week of rain, they're going to consume all the nectar that they've brought in and they're not going to be able to provide for the brood the way they should. So when it's a brand new colony of bees like that, you always want to put some kind of feeder shim on top, and you always want to make feed available for the bees just in case they need it, because if you don't have it in place and you don't have a shim box to feed them, you're not going to be able to keep them healthy and growing the way they should, particularly when we're counting on them to fill flow frames. And just like before, because we have a new colony, we want to make sure and reduce that entrance a little bit. Same thing, I take my little aluminum screen pieces here, squeeze them up and stick them on either side here and let them have entrance and egress through the center. But because they're screens, they're also venting. It just gives them an area that they can defend and gives them a good start. So we took the feeder off because now they've, in theory, filled this box. We have brood, we have lots of resources, honey, pollen. They're jamming up, the population's exploding. If you do not expand this hive right now, they will swarm out on you. So the next thing we want to do is we want to put a super on. So here we go. Now when you buy the system, it only comes with a stand, with a brood box, and then the next one in the kit is going to be the Flow Super, but we're talking about getting these things through a northern winter with heavy snow. So 8 frame boxes, your next box is going to be another Honey Super and not the Flow frames. So these mine have wooden frames in them right now. And of course you can use plastic. If you have drawn comb, you're way ahead. And once we put these on, can we still feed them? Or do we have to back off because we're going to be using this honey? No, we can still feed them, because we're not sealing that honey. This is for the bees. So this is where I put my feeding shim back on here. And now we also have the option to open it up so that they can have an upper entrance. They can also be vented through the top. And also, of course, we can put a feeder in there. There's already one in it. You can't have too many of these around. Remember, when you go out to visit and to feed them, bring a fresh, clean one with fresh, clean syrup in it, 1-to-1 during the summertime, and you're going to put that right in there. Now, because that feeder plugs the hole, we don't need to use the inner cover up here. We can just put the hive cover straight on. Now, the FlowHive inner cover that comes with it already has a perfect hole in it for those rapid round feeders. Again, this is made out of premium stock. They're nice and thick. The joints are great, and this intermediate thing too, that's nice and thick, much thicker than a standard inner cover. So if you put that on here, and again, remember, this is just the resources that they're going to use to get through winter. But then we put this FlowHive 2 cover in place on top of that. It looks like we're good to go, but if this is our winter setup, I went ahead, I know this is probably not going to make those at Flow very happy, because I drilled a hole in the front of my cover here. You can see flow through it. Put a hole right there so that I would have an upper entrance into this beehive, okay? And that also gives them venting up through here. And there's a queen excluder up through there, and we can block it up just for winter. But you know what the drawback is for the 6-frame, 8-frame Langstroth, is that a rapid round feeder doesn't fit underneath this cover. That's why I had to build the feeder shim just for this. And I think there are those being sold that fit it. But if you're putting your feeder shim in here, you, of course, can keep them fed through wintertime. And that is going to help them survive. So remember, you can take the rapid round out. You can have this open, and now you have an upper hive entrance, so they can come down and be replenishing this super now. So this is nothing but honey, not for you. And this is a brood and honey and pollen. There may be some pollen up through here too. Now what if we didn't put this box in here? What if we just went straight to the Flow Super? Not only are we not building resources for winter, but with the Flow Super, when they start to put honey and nectar in those cells, what happens is when you get some cold snaps, the bees will come up from the comb here, from the brood area, and they'll go right up in here and they'll start to consume the honey that they've stowed in the Flow Super. Plus, if you had your Flow Super right here, what are we going to have to put in between them? We're going to have to put that queen excluder in there. And I like to avoid that. So what I'm doing is creating a honey bridge that the queen won't cross to get into the Flow Super. So but what happens is, if you were weighing just this box by itself, when you get rainy days, you'd see a weight loss because they're consuming the resources they've just stored there. So we're avoiding them cycling, consuming and replenishing, consuming and replenishing. In this box, that's not going to be happening in your Flow Super because we have this honey resource in between. So now that they've got this box full, now that colony strength is high, now that the brood is strong, that's when we put on the Flow Super. So the Flow Super is up here on top. And we don't have to put a queen excluder here because we have a honey barrier through here. Now, can we continue to put a feeder shim on here and continue to feed the bees again? Hopefully you've learned for the other two examples that we no longer feed when we have honey supers on that are going to be used for human consumption. You can't even use essential oils, Honeybee Healthy, Pro Health, Brood Booster, any of that stuff because it's all marked not suitable for human consumption. So no more feeding. After this box up here, that's for you, no more feeding. Wintertime comes, just as I said before, you're going to drain off your FlowHive flow frames. You're going to take that off. And this one has windows on both sides. So you can see your flow frames in there. There they are. Hopefully they would be full of honey. Once you drain them off, it makes the box light enough to manage, and you're going to remove it. And now we're going to condense down for winter. So there again, Flow Super's off, Flow frames are off. Next thing we put on here can be a feeder shim. Remember, we have to get them through winter. That's why I made these boxes. And remember that a rapid round feeder will not fit under the roof of the FlowHive 2. So now I have this in here, and this is our winter survival box. And then of course we'll close this off. We want to prevent the upper entrance activity. And once you put a rapid round in there again, remember that that hole is plugged and they can't get up through there anyway, so all they have is access. Again, as freezing weather kicks in and the first snow starts to fly, you would have hopefully dropped down to a 2-to-1 sugar to water mixture by weight. And then you'll stop and you'll just have dry feed available to them. So that's it. This is your winter box. And of course, going into winter, you would make sure that the vent in the back is closed off. And then we're going to monitor their progress. And you want to make sure and come out here and clean off your landing board and do the best you can for your bees. And after that, you'll have done your very best. And if they make it, they make it. If they don't, it won't be because you didn't try. And thank you so much for watching. I hope you got something useful and beneficial out of my presentation on the various flow hives. I hope you can get yours through winter. Everything looked good for me this winter and they're coming out just fine. Let me know in the comment section below if you have any questions at all, and we'll address them in an upcoming frequently asked questions beginning with bees. Thanks again. Have a great weekend.